reminiscing, touching all the places that your lips were kissing. From the bedroom to the hallway in the kitchen, where our fantasies came true. Well, it's been a minute. I've been in the studio with you and busy. The tabs on my search bar are so explicit, but I only wanna come for you. Remember when you used to call me Wonder Woman? When I give you good love, I guess that's still true.
Hello, everybody.
Because I wonder, I do. I get myself thinking about you, and I wonder if you think about me too. Because I wonder. The magic was the energy between us, always staying static. And every time I threw it back,
can you hear me okay?
Saying nothing else can beat this view. Ooh, don't you miss the way you feel to lose yourself in me? Drowning in each other's oceans, nothing tastes as sweet. It's true.
Hello. Wonderful.
Remember when you used to call me Wonder Woman?
Hope you guys got your notes app out so you can
I guess that's still true.
take notes and snap.
I wonder, I do. I get myself thinking about you, and I wonder if you think about me too. Because I wonder.
How are you all this evening?
Is she bang with the same type game, the type of girl
early birds.
Big phone and name, big fan. She like capture big things. You'll step money, phone flip the 6 change. It's
Guys,
been the one
this
that
party
has
with
started
me.
more than once.
Until it
Not so
comes
good that you can see it from the front. She spot me like paparazzi. Shot me at glance and that Catwoman dance with the fat booty pants. Hot damn. Sinead, where you came from? Making wrist laced up. Every little makeup. Swims at the rock. Jipped on your frame up and sugar and smoke.
I'm having an okay day today. I'm excited to do this webinar. Talk to you in chat.
Talking
I'll be answering all questions you have this evening. If you have any questions, you can email them to me at xd@xdexperience.com. If you put them in the chat box, I may miss them. So if you really want your question answered, I suggest emailing me at xd@xdexperience.com. I'm going to cover a good portion of stuff this evening.
And tomorrow you can
I missed thing. Always hit me up. Hello, hello. You guys are all early and on time. To be early is to be on time. To on time is to be late and to be late. Thank you. Pink is my favorite color. You on my way, and you never say I'm just way too sharp. I'm not gonna make you see. More than just a silly crush. I if you even notice me. You gotta feel me. Just let me know. All night, I wanna feel it for you. Sometimes I even myself. Let me know, baby. Time I see you on, gonna walk right up to you. Say what's on my mind. I gotta make you see. This is such a silly kind. Wonder if you even notice me. You gotta feel me. I'm so excited to get started. I hope you guys are excited like I am. The link worked okay. It was cool. Hi, you guys got the Eventbrite? Somebody emailed saying that they didn't get it, so I want to make sure everybody else got it. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday evening. I'm going to start at 7:05-ish to get more people in. This will go a little over an hour. You might have to tell me to shut up. But we're going to talk a lot. So I'm going to talk a lot. You guys emailed me a lot of really good questions, and I'm going to try to answer all of them this evening.
You took it as the truth.
So again, take out your notepads. Don't smoke too much while you're watching me, if that's your zhuzh, because this won't be recorded for you to see over and over again. But I will refer you to places where I'm getting information. Shut up! These are from my dance with me, y'all. Welcome. So depending on how this goes, I might do something for every state because I can talk about this in every large market. Because the government says okay. Hey Quana. Hey Luna. Hi Chris Rogers. Caleb, Cicely, Camel Toe and the Beast. Hello. Monet. D3B4. Shanice. Tiago. Genesee. How y'all be? How y'all is CJP? Oh, Janae. Ready. Hey.
Only you. Only you. Only you.
A little bit more. Welcome, y'all. Welcome, y'all. Oh, I'm turning off the music later in a minute. The music won't be on. I just need mood music for y'all. It will not be saved, which is why I'm encouraging you all to take notes that you can. The cool thing about this is all this stuff is actually public information, and I will guide you how to find it. But if you are on a mobile device, you might have to figure out a way to take notes someplace else or on pen and paper, whatever. I'm gonna get started in 3-4 minutes. So use the bathroom. Hello. Use the bathroom. Which is what I should do, honestly. And yeah, everybody take your bathroom break. 7:06. We will get started. Again, if you have any questions, or 7:05, excuse me. If you have any questions, email them to me I don't want them to get lost in the chat. I will try to answer them if I see them, but if you really have a pressing question, email me at xd@thexdexperience.com and I can answer that for you. I will be answering all of your questions tonight and then some. Okay? So go get you some water, use the bathroom, like I'm going to do, and we'll be back. So, 1 second. Hopefully I can get it back. It's fine. I'm in the bed. Oh, look at my hat. You can do that. Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Let's get started. I'm excited. Hello, everybody. I am XD, Xavier Delow, darling, and I'm here to present to you New York Housing 101. The do's, the don'ts, and the won'ts of the New York City Housing Lottery. So, hi, everybody. Congratulations. Thank you for supporting this endeavor. But most importantly, thank you for making an investment as a New Yorker so you understand what to do to get this housing. My background is in social work and the housing crisis. If you didn't know, I've been working. Yeah, I have this podcast and comedy or whatever, but I've also been working in the housing crisis for about almost 10 years now. And in the last 4 have been focusing on housing subsidies, grants, and affordable housing. So I am low-income tax credit certified across the U.S. of A., which means I am good on any MLK Boulevard. And I'm also fair housing certified. That means that I know Section 504 of the HUD handbook like grits and biscuits. That also means I'm also certified as a developer here in New York City. I currently work as a marketing project manager for this new development that I tweeted about the other day of the Disability Act, 504. So when it comes to fair housing, a lot of it has to do with the Disability Act. Yeah, I'm the marketing project manager for the building I tweeted about the other day. $53 million project. What we're leasing up 125 units, 65 to people who live with dual diagnosis. That means people who live with a serious mental illness as well as substance use issues. And the other half will be for low income or, yeah, it's affordable. I have rented up a 250 unit building also in the Bronx, luxury units, another 100-something unit in the Bronx as well, and a couple of other projects. Worked on Via, which is a building on the west side, and the Ashland, 250 Ashland in downtown Brooklyn. Okay. But anywho, I do want to say that this webinar, any series that you take from me, is not going to guarantee you an apartment. It is designed to help you understand how the lottery works and also help you not waste your time or get discouraged if you've been applying for a very long time. For example, somebody emailed me and they said, you know, oh my gosh, XD, I've been trying for 3 years and I see I can't get selected or anything. How can you help me? That's something we'll discuss today. You know, we'll go on and talk about facts, the myths, some tips and tools that you can use to help you guide you along the way. So the great site and the biggest tool that you will ever need in this life, and especially in New York City, is the ability to read and read carefully. All of the answers are out there that you need. You just have to know how to read and read carefully. So if you are just to bookmark this site for any questions that you may or may not have, you can go to www. Also, excuse me because my nose is running. Excuse me. Oof, sorry, my allergies. We're all family. www.nyc.gov/HPD. It will have all the information that you could ever possibly need and a lot of things that we're going to cover today. So let's start first quickly. If you aren't familiar with what the New York City Housing Lottery is. So a few years ago, you know, the people at City Hall realized that housing is hard as fuck, right? And to combat this homelessness issue, they've mandated that 20% of all buildings, unless if it's a specific type of building, will have to lease 20% of every unit, of 20% of units in the building, and make them affordable. We don't necessarily say low income anymore because of what's called an AMI, and I'll talk about that in a second. So if you see all these buildings being built or whatever, you'll also notice that there are signs that have like income brackets. That's how you know that it's up for the New York City Housing Lottery. There's listings in every borough and in every income bracket. So people have asked, and if you're familiar with it, have applied like everything is for low income. I make way too much money, or I make way less money. The answer is, or to combat that is, there are units of every income bracket. You just have to look. A lot of people that you see are the ones that are listed are 60% AMI. I'll talk about AMI in a second. But a lot of us are above that. But if you look in certain places, the AMI or the income brackets will be a lot higher. So AMI means area median income. Excuse me. So housing is considered affordable when a household spends no more than 1/3 of its income on rent. Now, we all know that a lot of us here in New York City or anywhere else are spending way more than 30% of their income. So the city and some actuaries have calculated what you would need to earn in order to be in this area median income tax bracket. I do want to say all low income tax housing tax credit buildings I'll refer to as LIHTC. And all of this is based on IRS law and code. So, for example, if you see a building applied, like in the Bronx, a brand new building in the South Bronx, more than likely it's going to have a area median income maximum of $43,800 something dollars. That's what's called 60% AMI. And that's based on the type of people that live in the neighborhood. A lot of people that live in this particular neighborhood more than likely make maximum this amount of money. Some might even be lower, like 40%. Sometimes you can see that the area is a lot poorer, or the people who inhabit the neighborhood are a lot poorer or more impoverished. And so the income would be maximum for the building to get in would be a lot lower. Another good example is 250 Ashland. 250 Ashland, that's downtown Brooklyn. It's called Gotham, and that's where the new building that has the restaurants and stuff at the bottom. That is what's 135% AMI, meaning the area median income of the people that live in that neighborhood is upwards like 6 figures. Does that make sense? Sometimes most often that there's going to be buildings and the area that it's built in determine how much or who qualifies for that unit. Okay. Any questions so far? That's a lot of information. So I know, again, to review, some areas have different income brackets because sometimes that area is rich and sometimes that area is not. If you notice, if a building is in a poorer neighborhood like the South Bronx or Brownsville or somewhere out in Far Rockaway, you would know that the income brackets, and if you also notice on the advertisements, the rents are a lot lower. Why? Because the people that live in that community aren't making that much money. But if you're trying to get an affordable unit in downtown Brooklyn, which is damn near Manhattan now, the rents and the income bracket is going to go up. Are you guys with me so far? Type yes if you're with me. Let me know. It's hard to not see your faces, so I can see if you look confused and be like, oh no, I don't know. Okay, you're with me. I see one person. I see 2 people. Got it. Okay, we're here. Amen. Hallelujah. All right. Let's talk about how you apply for the New York City Housing Lottery. This will clear up some of the confusion about if it's rigged or not. You go on and you can apply, and the best way to apply and the easiest way to apply is through signing up for New York City Housing Connect. You can go to nyc.gov/Housing Connect. Once you're on there, you can create a profile, which will be your general application. Fill it out completely, and you save it. And that one application can be applied to everything that you see on New York City Housing Connect, and it's just a one-click apply. Well, it's one click, you verify it, and then you apply, and then you click apply. It's very simple. However, as a tip, if you signed up for New York Housing Connect in 2015, and you're still applying for things in 2018, I suggest you update your profile on Housing Connect, because more than likely your work situation has changed, your life situation has changed, your financial situation has changed. And keep in mind, once you apply for a building, you cannot go back in your application and update that information. Once you've clicked apply, it is done. Okay? Once you've clicked apply, it is done. So a tip is to, if there's something constantly happening in your life and you're constantly applying, please update your information as you go along. Now, there will get to a point where, say, for example, you applied with old information and a building contacted you and they sent you a rejection, and they'll tell you why they rejected you. Say, for example, in 2015, on your initial housing profile, you made $50,000. However, you now in 2018 make $38,000 and you're just yourself. And you get a letter in the mail from a developer saying you got rejected because you make too much money, you could always appeal, which we'll talk about appeals later, and say, this ain't what I make, this is old information, take what I have now, and they have to honor that. Okay? You do, and this is to Camel Toe and the Beast, you do have the option of applying via snail mail to any and every housing development that is on Housing Connect. However, there is no advantage whether you apply via the internet or via snail mail. Everything is randomized, honestly and truly. So it wouldn't matter what kind of or how you've applied. You get treated equally, whatever method of which you apply. I will say though, if you're going to apply via snail mail, and this is when you see the advertisements for different developments in the newspaper, more often they advertise in AM New York or the Metro or the Bronx Times or somewhere in Brooklyn, wherever. Know that you need to follow the directions carefully. Send a self-addressed stamped envelope in another envelope folded neatly so that they can send you an application. And when they send you the application, fill it out completely and send it back, not to where it came from, but to where it says on the very first page of the housing application. Oftentimes, and I've said this before on Twitter, that people don't get selected because they don't read carefully. People have missed plenty of opportunities. I have dealt with appeals every which way possible, and a lot of it, a good 40, 50, 45% has a lot to do with people being lazy and not reading. So again, if you choose to apply via paper mail, there is full, complete directions on it. You can read it carefully and send it where it tells you to. Okay. Everybody understands so far? We good? We good? Okay. If you live in Brooklyn, would you be eligible to get an apartment location? We're going to talk about that, Peter Benjamin. So glad you asked. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about going forward. So you apply for a building. Let's go through the whole process, shall we? I live in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and I want to apply to a new building on 125th Street in Harlem. Keep that scenario in mind. The way the New York City housing lottery is set up, I'm glad you asked that, Caramel Delight, because I'm about to answer that question right now. The way the New York City housing lottery is set up, everybody is able to apply. However, there are preferences that people are selected by first. So, for example, the lottery ends on like October 22nd. Everybody's applied that can apply. Nobody can apply afterwards. The city will create a whole list. They will input the paper applications if you send it by snail mail. Takes a couple weeks to do. They have IT guys randomize all of the applications, and the developer or the marketing agent will receive a log. A log is, sorry, I live in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Again, the ghetto. Not anymore. Do or gentrify at this point. It'll be actually randomized. The developer or the marketing agent will receive a log, and they will commence to doing eligibility appointments and selecting applicants for apartments. When you apply, you will see on the actual ad that it'll say that there are preferences. Preferences are what developers and marketing agents need to honor first, meaning those are the people you need to seek out and move in first before anybody else. So, I'm seeing your emails. Oh, that's also a good question about disabilities. We're gonna get to that. There are preferences listed on the ad. So if you notice, there are community board, meaning people who live in the community board of which that building is being built, people who work for the city or municipal employees, and people who live with either a vision, hearing, or mobility impairment. How everybody is selected goes as follows. There is a log book, like I said before, of everybody who's ever applied. Everybody's given a random log number. And when you're calling about your application, and if you know your log number, remember that log number because it's easy for people to recall what's happening. Because you're not a person really, you're just a number. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way the word works. 50,000 people apply for these buildings at any given day. So you're just a number. People who live with disabilities are selected first. These disabilities qualify as people who live with a mobility impairment, a vision impairment, or a hearing impairment. They need to be verifiable and certifiable by a doctor. They have to sign a note. And if the doctor says, yes, that you will have this disability for more than 12 months or an ongoing, you qualify. And if you are income eligible for that unit, which we'll get to later on, you would be able to get the unit above everybody else. When it comes to disabilities, the HUD standards and guidelines are only for people who live with mobility, vision, and hearing impairments. Mental illness is not considered a disability in this type of capacity. Because the units that are being marketed as for disabled tenants are crafted. are crafted or developed to fit the needs of the impairment. So if I live with a mobility disability impairment, the unit that I'm going to be given is an ADA unit, which is an adaptive disability unit, meaning it has lower kitchen cabinets, things that are installed for me already. Now, we could talk about fair housing later and how like people have to honor and install a whole bunch of other things to make it accessible for the handicap. However, these units, when you do a marketing plan, the city tells you how many percentage of the units, based on how many units you're able to market, must be. So it's like 2% of the units, and so that's how many units you have to give to people who live with a disability. So people are selected first based off of their disability. So again, to answer your questions about mental health, that's been a conversation a while in the housing community, but the way HUD, Federal Department of Urban Housing and Urban Development, always sanction it for people who live with mobility, vision, and hearing impairments. Understand? Everybody got it? Let me know if you're with me. Are there preferences for people living in a shelter? No, there is not. Unless if the address is in the community board of which the building is being built, or if they live in a DV shelter, which we'll get to later. Let's talk about the next preference, community board. Community board, again, is where the building might reside or is being built. Where you may live across the street from a building that's being built, and you may not be in the same community board. So the best way to check that is going to maps.nyc.gov, and you can put in the address of the building or the development that you're interested in applying or whatever, and seeing if you're the community board. The best way to snag an affordable unit is if you fit any of these preferences first. You have a greater chance, I'll say that. Not saying you will, it's just the chances are a little bit better. So if you happen to be in the community board, of which the building, maps.nyc.gov. If you happen to be the community board, if you come to income qualify and credit, don't sweat about credit, we'll get to it. You will be fine. You would have a greater, especially if your log number is lower. These preferences also go by log number order. So just because you live with a mobility impairment and your log number is like 13,000, I guarantee you there's probably gonna be somebody with a log number of 4,000 with the same ability, with the same issue as you have, and can qualify. They would get the unit first. So even if you do fulfill a preference, you can, if somebody has a lower log number than you do, they can bump you because everything is in log number order. How are log numbers determined? A computer. Back to preferences. There's municipal employees, so if you work for the city. Certain people think they work for the city and they don't necessarily work for the city. Like if you work for MTA, I'll get to upstate in a second. If you work for MTA, that is a state, regardless of how people argue about it. It is a state agency. So you will be considered general population because you do not work for the city of New York. Again, if you work for like the SUNY system, you work for the state. CUNY, some are from the state, some are from the city. It depends. The person you have your appointment with when you're called will let you know. There are no preferences for people who live in safe havens or in shelters. I'm letting this pass by. And I'm kind of laughing in my head. If you listen to Jada XD, you know I'm laughing about a siren going by. Okay. But yes, there is no preference for shelters, unfortunately. If the person lives in the shelter who and they live in the community board, or they have mobility or a vision, or they have some sort of impairment that qualifies them, then yes. The only time that people who live in shelters get a preference, and it's not necessarily a preference, is if a person is in a domestic violence shelter and they have had to relocate because of the abuse. That's when things can get a little tricky. And if you're in that situation and you apply, the person that's interviewing you will work that out. Okay? After all those preferences are done, there's general population. General population is everybody else in New York City. Again, this is the last preference. It may not seem like a preference, but it is. General population. Why? Because it's only for the people in the 5 boroughs. If you live outside of the 5 boroughs, you will be called last, way after everybody else who was applied that lives in New York City, because this is supposed to benefit New York City residents. If you live in Mount Vernon, you do not live in New York City. If you live in Glendale, or Glen Cove, excuse me, you do not live in New York City. If you live in Yonkers, you do not live in New York City. If you live in West New York, you live in New Jersey. There's so many times in my experience that people are like, well, I just live right there, or I work in the city, or I work in the city and live out in Long Island. I work in the city and live in New Jersey. Does this mean that I can I get over that? No. You, at the time of lease signing, you need to be a resident of New York City. Period. The reason why is because you can take it back to what's taken out of your taxes. If you don't have, like, you have to be paying New York City taxes in order for you to qualify for a unit. Now, if you do not do that and you live out of state and everybody on that list who lives in New York City has been exhausted, then you will get called. So how that is probable, slim to none. Outside of that makes you a resident, outside of your address. Let's get to that. So following this example that I live in Brooklyn and I'm trying to get an apartment on 125th Street, I get selected for an eligibility appointment. It does not count. I get a letter. I get an email. Now, I should say, on your housing application, housing profile, it asks you your method of contact, your preferred method of contact. If you're one of those people that like to change emails and yada, 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 make sure you update that. As a tip, I would create and remember the email and password for the Housing Connect site and just apply through it on there, because people who are contacting you for these appointments to get you into the interview, to get you into these apartments, they can only contact you by your preferred method of contact. And it's only by paper mail or by email. Reason why? They need something that's trackable. So don't expect a phone call until after you've made contact or anything like that. You can only be contacted through your preferred method of contact. So check your spam. A lot of eligibility appointments get lost in spam. And you would need to figure that out. So an eligibility person, they're called eligibility specialists. They will call you or email you. They will email you or mail you an appointment, telling you, asking when you can come in for an interview. They might give you a range of dates to come in and times, and you select, but you are to select the initial interview. As a tip, all of us are working girls or working guys, and they are required to accommodate you. The law says that they are able to, they will not advertise that they have evening and weekend dates for interviews. However, you can say, it is the law that you have and must accommodate me. So give me a date and time that works. Now, don't say like, you know, I get off at 8 p.m. You got to meet with me at 9:30. No, that's egregious. If that's the case, you got to meet with me another day on like a Saturday. So the city will ask you, will tell you at marketing meetings that you have to be available one late night and one weekend day a month. No, Caramel Delight. You have to live. It doesn't matter if you have a business or not. Live, reside. Doesn't matter if you have a business. It doesn't matter if you run a school, own a Golden Crest. You have to be a resident of New York City. Period. Are there any disadvantages of making more than one profile? Yes. We'll get to that in a second. Does race? No, because you don't have to. Everybody's a number. I don't know what people's ethnicities are until I meet them. Like, I mean, people choose to write black, or people choose to write white or whatever, but like, no, like you can't. you can't discriminate because it goes off by a log number. So like only time I'm just like, that's the checks and balances, right? So like, say for example, if I wanted to give somebody black an apartment, I couldn't because they'd have to be, they'd have to fall in line with where the log numbers are. Like if they're log number 26,000, meaning they're the 26,000th applicant, and I done skipped over 25,999 people, something's going to be fishy. Ooh, y'all are really trying to find loopholes about this living situation here. How long do you have to be living in NYC? There's no limit. You just have to be a resident. And prove that you live there. So you prove it by address. You can also prove it by your employment, like where your checks are going. They ask you for like your bank statements. We'll get to that. A bunch of other things. So exactly. So back to what I was saying. Eligibility specialist contacts me and they ask me to bring in a lot of documents for the eligibility appointment. They will ask me to bring in things based on what I put on my housing application. I put in that I work one job. I've been working at that job for the last 2 years, 3 years. That I have a checking account and a savings account, and that I don't have any children, and that I'm single, and that I live in an apartment with family, or I live in an apartment, period. They will ask me to bring in 4 to 6 pay stubs, consecutive pay stubs. They will ask me to bring in 6 months of checking statements from my bank, 1 month current of savings account. They will ask if you have any retirement or anything like that. To bring all that in. You schedule your time and you bring all that stuff in. You bring copies. You don't bring the originals. You bring copies ahead of time to hand them. More often than not, they will send you away because you did not provide copies for them. So you bring it to them. They will calculate your income. Okay? So let's talk about the biggest thing ever. How to calculate your income. People have been disqualified, or people are so upset that they get disqualified. I don't make that much. I make this amount. I know what I take home, and yada, yada, yada. So I'm going to tell you and teach you how to calculate your income. This is the crux of the whole thing. The reason why they ask you for 4 to 6 pay stubs is because people who are developers calculate your income more than one way. To determine eligibility, developers or marketing agents are to determine what the applicant's highest potential income can be. Potential. What you bring home is not what's counted. All income and all income brackets are what you gross, not what you net. So to calculate your income, what email address, it's whatever the developer is. I should say then Housing Connect is just a hub. It's like Monster. It's like Indeed. It's not one massive thing. Every developer has its own team and leasing agents and all that good stuff for each building that's listed. So be on the lookout for any type of thing. They'll put in the subject line of what it is, but every developer has a different way of different email addresses and all that. So how to calculate income. Ready? You take the last 6 consecutive pay stubs that you have. Okay? You add the gross of those 6 pay stubs. You divide it by 6. That number is the average amount of what you bring home every week or every 2 weeks or semi-monthly or monthly. You would take that number, the average of the 6, and you would multiply it by how many pay periods there are in a year for you. If you get paid weekly, you would multiply that average by 52. If you get paid bi-weekly, you would multiply that number by 26. If you get paid semi-monthly, you will multiply that number by 24. If you get paid monthly, you multiply it by 12. That is one way, and the easiest way, of how to calculate your income. Another way is that they will calculate your year-to-date. So oftentimes, there's money hidden in your paycheck. Sometimes overtime isn't counted in your average 6. Maybe you got a bonus and that showed up in your year-to-date number and not your hourly wage or your salary rate. So here's how you calculate your year-to-date. Are you guys with me so far? Let me know. Are you with me? Are you with me? Okay. Yeah. So if you get paid bi-weekly, you multiply it by 26. Year-to-date income is this. You take your most recent pay stub and you look at the gross amount on the year-to-date. You divide that year-to-date number by how many pay periods have passed. So it's easy to look. You could Google a bi-weekly or a weekly payroll calendar, and you would just look at the date that you got paid on that calendar, and more than likely next to it, it'll tell you what pay period it was. So like, if you got paid on the 2nd, it was like the 22nd pay period if you are a bi-weekly pay period schedule. So you would divide that number and you would get a number that's very similar to what the average you make every week or every 2 weeks. Then you would multiply that number by how many pay periods there are in a year. So again, 52, if you get paid weekly, 26 if you get paid bi-weekly, 24 if you get paid semi-monthly, and 12 if you get paid monthly. If you work overtime, just one time, and you don't do it any other time, that still is added to your income because you earned it, regardless. Because ultimately, you're going to claim it on your taxes. So, or you're taxed on it. So, for camel toe and the bee, so if you went crazy on overtime for 1 month and still poor, but developers will overlook my salary, it doesn't matter. The numbers are the numbers. It's what you've earned. Even I know we all work overtime to make up some money, make a little extra cash. You still need have to be income eligible at the time of lease signing. Remember, it's the highest potential earnings. You have the potential to earn a bunch more money if you are working overtime, even if it was just that fluke and your boss was like, I need you. And it's the only one time. It's still potential because one day, 2 months later, that same manager could be like, hey, I need you. I'm explaining now what's happening after you get called in for an interview. So you bring all these documents for the interview or the eligibility appointment. They calculate your income. They make you sign a waiver saying to check your credit. You pay the credit application fee for 1 to 2 people, adult humans, is $25. If it's 3 or more, it's $50 total. If you're in the AMI bracket of 135% and up, meaning you make like high 70 and up, the application fee would change, or the credit check fee would change. It'd be like start at 50 and then 75. Let's talk about more ways to calculate income. So I gave you year to date, and I gave you average 6. There's also your taxes. We look at your taxes. And we ask for all W-2s and 1099s and Schedule Cs to see what you're actually making is actually what you're actually making. If you are, this is also how we end up finding out many people do tax fraud. But if you do your taxes well and you claim everything that you're supposed to, I would suggest looking at the IRS website. A lot of people say, oh, I don't have to claim that. I didn't work enough. If you earned about $10,600, you got to claim it. Whatever it is. Babysitting gigs, if it's $600 or more, you got to claim it. So I suggest looking at the IRS schedule. It's on irs.gov, and they tell you how much you need to make, or what the threshold is for you not to claim stuff and whatnot. Because if it comes out and you find that, you're making a whole bunch of side money, you're not claiming it, you would be disqualified. How would people find out, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. If you are claiming that on your application to become income eligible, you're going to be asked for proof. If you're not claiming this money and it's just super hush hush and it's not in your application or anything else that would make you income eligible, then nobody needs to know about it. But if you said, I'm a babysitter and my spare time to make you income eligible at the time of lease signing, you got to provide proof. And if you provided proof and that's not taxable income, you didn't file taxes for it, then you get disqualified because you didn't file your taxes for a low income tax credit housing unit. It's in the text. Let's talk about credit. I got about 30 more minutes, and then we're going to go. A good thing to know about credit is that, you cannot be rejected off credit score alone. I'm going to say that again. You can't be rejected off credit scores alone. HPD, New York City Department of Housing and Preservation and Development, in their marketing handbook, which I suggest you to read, which I gave you the link before, nyc.gov/HPD, they have their own basic credit criteria. A developer cannot be more stringent than HPDs. They could be a lot less, but not more. HPD's credit threshold is about like 580. They talk about like how many delinquencies is there, whatever. Every developer is different. Some developers are way less stringent, and some of them are just right on par with HPD. I suggest, even before when you're at your eligibility appointment, you can ask them what the credit criteria is. You have every right to ask before they run your credit. Also, to answer the question, anytime that they run your credit, it is a hard inquiry. So every time you run your credit, it goes down some. I don't know. I'm not a credit specialist, so I don't know how much hard inquiries. I know they last 2 years, but I don't know how many points is going down. So my suggestion to people is make sure that you're doing this right. Calculate your income right and make sure you got all your ducks in a row so you're not having them run your credit a shit ton of times and you're not getting anything fruitful. You can go on HPD's website and you can click on developer and you can find the marketing handbook. And that tells you how every developer has to market the handbook. It also tells you everything I'm telling you today. Minus tips and tricks. Credit, again, things are depending upon the developer. I do want to let you know that they cannot run your credit if they do not have a unit for you. So they will hold on to your money order. It's always a money order, never a check, until they have a unit for you. If you are getting called off a fluke and your log number is like 38,000, you may get the unit, you may not. But if you get a letter saying that you've been put on a wait list call and get your money back. I should let it be known that the length of time you could be called for a housing or eligibility appointment would be between 2 months and a year. It may be even longer than that, because sometimes buildings don't get built properly, or they're like delayed due to construction. Some of them are they go through a whole bunch of issues when it comes to like eligibility and yada yada yada. No, that's untrue, K-Pair. For credit, they can't just reject you off your credit score alone. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that's on your credit report. So for example, if I have a low credit score of like 430, but I don't have any delinquencies, like I don't owe T-Mobile $400 and I don't owe my cable company $1,000, and it's just my credit score that's low, I'm accepted if I'm income eligible. Now, if you have a low credit score and delinquencies of whatever amount, I don't know what the threshold could be. It could be over $1,000. It could be over $5,000. Then I would be rejected. If you don't get a response at all, that's probably because you might want to check how you've been received, what your method of contact is. Or you can go on Housing Connect and you can see your log number for every development that you've applied to. And if it's something ridiculous like 50,000 or 60,000, then I wouldn't even be worried about getting a response. But if you apply to a building that's like 200 units and your log number was like 4,000, you might want to check. You might have gotten a call or a letter, email or a letter. Okay. So with that being said, say for example, you pass your credit check, you pass your criminal check. They say, hey, we have an apartment for you. You see the unit that you like, you love it, it's great. You do need to supply 1 month's rent and 1 month's security, whatever the advertisement listing is. So if the advertisement said the rent is $830, then you need to provide $830 for security and $830 for first month's rent. You sign your lease. Well, there's two parts. Ooh, good question. What if your income changes mid-process or after signing the paperwork? Ooh, this is tricky. This has happened to a couple people that I've worked with. Because sometimes the process is lengthy. Don't get upset. This isn't instantaneous. This is a long process. Sometimes you'll have to resubmit documents over and over again because documents expire. They may have contacted you in June and you brought in these documents in, but you still haven't moved in, and come December, they're going to ask you for it again because documents have a lifespan of 120 days, according to the IRS. So be patient. Okay. And I say that to say is like, if I contacted you in July with all these documents and you bring them to me and you're income eligible then, and then in December, you still haven't moved in, and I have to refresh your documents, and I see that your income has changed for the worst, then you'll get disqualified. You have to be income eligible at the time of lease signing, period. You have to be credit, criminal, and income eligible at the time of lease signing. Lucky for a whole bunch of other people that you only get your credit checked once as well as your criminal. But you have to be income eligible at the time of lease signing, regardless of whenever you sign your lease. Now, every year you have to recertify. More often than not, once you've signed your lease, you can make however much money or the least amount of money you can as long as your rent is paid. They can't kick you out if you make more than what you did when you first signed your lease. The only thing that would ever change is, say, if you got in and you were making $43,000 and then the next 2 years you started making $900,000, then they will probably charge you the market rate of the unit. So like, instead of the $830 you were paying, and because you make $900,000, they're gonna make you pay the $1,750 because you make way too much. The key number is making more than 140% of the unit rate that you got in at. The income max. If you make more than 140% at the income max, then you're done. And that's after you moved in. And most people, that doesn't work. That doesn't happen. So that's the process really quickly. If you get rejected, you always have 10 days to appeal. I always tell people to appeal. Other people will review it, some people with different eyes, and you might get the unit that you want. So don't give up. So I'm gonna look at your emails and some questions. So, are there periodical income checks? Say my income goes up, will the rent will as well? There's no periodical income checks, only once a year every year. That's it. Do you pay first, last month security? Just the first month in security. I noticed that buildings are usually in minority neighborhoods, especially in Brooklyn. I don't see any buildings in Bensonhurst, Bay Ridge, Midwood, Sheepshead Bay. Is there a reason behind, is the same reason behind the shelter system? I was told the city built more shelters in minority neighborhoods because that's where the people who need it originally came from. I'm not aware. I just think it goes off of where space is and where the developer wants to build a building. And wherever they can get cheap land and get tax credits off of. Okay. Hello, Xavier. I have a question related to the New York City Affordable Housing Lottery. I'm a recent college graduate living at home with my parents. However, I got hired to start a new, well-paying full-time job this week. Can I use my biweekly pay stubs as income verification if I'm offered affordable housing? Or is this agency looking for at least a year's worth of income? No. You could always use whatever income you're getting at the time. I'm also confused, Sayana, what you're saying. Are you able to apply even though you work in this field? Oh, am I personally? I could apply to any housing lottery. I just can't apply to the one I'm marketing. Right, nobody's trying to live in Bensonhurst. We gotta that's racist there. How exactly are you given a lottery number? It's randomized. It's super randomized. Trust me. There's no like, it's a computer that does it. One's called, why is it that they overbook for interviews versus numbers of apartments that are available? Good question. Because it's a mathematical equation, and it's about it's like probability. People select 10 people to 1 unit because throughout the process, people drop out. People don't. People become income ineligible. People won't pass their credit. People won't pass their criminal. People will drop out because they say that it's a lengthy process. Some people don't check their emails when they're supposed to and miss out on deadlines. Ooh, freelancing. We'll talk about freelancing in a little bit. How can I assure that I'm called often? You can't. But what I will say is that, again, you have a better probability of applying for buildings in which the community board in which you live. So you can look around your neighborhood and see if you see a building, and if you don't live with an impairment of mobility, vision, or hearing, or if you don't work for the city, try living in the community board. I have a question. What does lease up completed application status mean? It means they're done renting all the units. What's the significance of a lower lottery number versus a higher one? That's easy. The lower the number, the more probability that you're going to get it. Okay. Hello, Xavier. I myself have been applying for housing for over 3 years. What is the criteria for being picked for these units? We talked about that. Is there a minimum maximum you should be making? Depends. Are families the first choice? No. It's random. I'm a bartender and I make much more than some of my friends that have been chosen for higher end buildings. So I'm wondering if it's just something I'm doing wrong. Do I have the worst luck? It's based on luck, honestly. But also, just because your coworkers got something and they told you how they got it is probably a lie. Because I'm finding that when people ask me about things on Twitter, like, well, my friend got it and she did this. And I was like, first of all, that's illegal and they're going to jail, period. Which means people are lying to you. This is all a legalized process and you can't skate through it. So they're just showing off, or they're a lot poorer than they say they are. So, hello. I was wondering if we make over the maximum income requirements for certain apartments, is it even worth it to apply? No. If you make over and you know how to calculate your income, don't apply. If you know how to calculate your income, then don't waste your time. As simple as that. Now that you have these tools, don't waste your time and apply. I know how much I gross every year with my again, everything is gross income. Nothing has anything to do with what you take home. So that is what you should put on your application. How much do you earn gross annually? Nobody cares what you take home. It's all about what you gross. Next question. My boyfriend and I live together with our 2 kids and have been thinking about the lottery for a while. Do you have to be married to be eligible to live together? No, you do not. I work part-time and off the books. The ghetto. Don't ever tell anybody that you work off the books. That's a huge tip. Don't tell anybody that you work off the books. Especially if you're not including it in your if you're not including it on your application, and it's not somewhere to be found in your bank account, statements, or anything else, then shut up. Because if you're working off the books, that means you're doing something illegal. So, again, no. If you put it on your application, that means it gets to be verified and checked. So if you don't put it on your application, then nobody can know about it. Okay? Is it true that if you apply in an area you've lived in for most of your life, you get a priority spot for housing in said area? If you live in the same community board at the time of lease signing, except for exceptions, meaning if you were in a shelter and you got moved around, then yes. Always remember, gross income at the time of lease signing. Gross income at the time of lease signing. New York City resident. There is no way of getting around it. Get that out of your mind and rid yourself of any question of how to finagle the system. At the time of lease signing, live New York City resident, gross income. Period. Someone asked about multiple applications. You will get disqualified. You have multiple applications. For example, if you put an application with you and your boo thing, and then your boo thing puts an application on with you on it, you will both automatically get disqualified because you are inducing eligibility, which means you're trying to pimp the system. You are going to jail. You're not really going to jail. You just get disqualified. And if you do it more than once, HPD will flag you and you will never be able to apply again. Period. That's actually very true. So one application is enough. And if you keep doing those infractions where you apply with your boo thing applies for you or any other person, that kind of like that, you will just get disqualified completely from the whole program. Are 3-bedroom apartments rare? Yeah. I mean, it's New York City. Like, everybody's trying to do these micro apartments kind of now. So it's very difficult to find some, but there are some that are available. My suggestion is to look in the outer boroughs, like in Far Rockaway, they do have 3 bedrooms. And then sometimes in the Bronx, they do. And in Queens. Is there a trick to finding out about housing right away and being able to sign up? Yeah, if you apply for New York City Housing Lottery on the website, they send you emails as soon as one becomes available. It goes live, but it doesn't matter at what time you apply because it's all random. You could apply at the very last minute and you could get a log number of 2. So it doesn't matter at what time you apply as long as you apply. If you make a decent income of $100,000 to $150,000 a year, 3-person family, is it worth entertaining housing lotteries? Yes. There, you would apply for what is an AMI of 135 or 165 and up. You're not going to get like rent that's like $830, but you could get something that's like 15 to 17. Does the city check your credit for every application submitted? Yes. If so, would applying to multiple listings increase your credit? Yes. Okay. Can you apply for an apartment with more bedrooms than you technically need? No. The HPD has on the advertisement, it'll tell you how many people can live in this unit and the income bracket. One person cannot apply for a 2-bedroom. That defeats the whole purpose of the program. If we're ever put on a wait list, what is the best way to contact them to inquire when we might be higher on the list of selectees? They should have given you contact information on that letter. And you can call them. Do you know if these buildings also go for individuals who are in categories in housing. I'm going to assume, I don't know what that means exactly. But I'm going to go to the some emails. I'd like to know what folks who are disabled and currently on disability can do to apply to housing lotteries. There are a lot of financial minimum requirements to the majority of folks who cannot meet and disqualify, blah, blah. Also, what does 5% and 10% housing reserve for disabilities mean? I explained that earlier about mobility, vision, and hearing. And again, those percentage of units that are labeled that are they have ADA units for. So yeah, if a person is disabled and they're in a shelter or whatever, on that housing application, you could say that you have a housing subsidy, whether it's LINK, or SEPS or FEPS. Excuse me. Section 8. Those type of things. You can, if you have a housing subsidy like that, you can ignore the minimum income. You can ignore the income requirements. Because if you have a housing subsidy like that, or like the developmental one, OWAA something, DD, if you have a housing subsidy, the income requirements are null. Unless if you are making $100,000 on the side, then that's different. But if you have a housing subsidy, you can apply. Okay, these are good questions. I'm breezing through them. Quick question about freelancers and independent contractors. How does this apply as far as updating income and providing employer information? Also, what are some documents to keep on file when the applicant is selected? Great. Here's what I tell people who are independent contractors like myself. Keep whatever you're going to plan on giving to your tax preparer is what the eligibility interviewer will need. That's the best way to say it. Whatever you're going to give to your tax person is what you would need to give to the eligibility specialist. Wow, you guys are asking the hard-hitting questions. I'm going to take a couple more, and then we're going to skedaddle. When your status reads lottery pending, does that mean you will be chosen soon? That means that they are preparing to lottery pending. I feel that means that the lottery hasn't started yet. Meaning, like, they're preparing to begin the lottery so you can actually apply. Anytime there's a status change on Housing Connect in blue, where it says like lease up or tenant selection in progress, that's when they're going through all the applications. Lease up completed or rent up completed, that means they're done. They filled up all the units. What happens when units open up after a year or two of the lottery and closing or completing? Imagine a company going back to the wait list for new residents. Yes, they are. They have to. And they go on lot number order. If you get approved and you're not okay with the building, can you reject the application? You sure can. You don't have to do anything until you have signed the lease. It depends on the developer. Sometimes people do the interviews in the building where you would be living. Some people will do all that, and then you will go see it later. It depends. It depends. Every development is different. Okay, I have time for one more question, and then I'm gonna get out of here. Hopefully this is super helpful, and I hope I answered a bunch of your questions. Hopefully you recommend me to all your friends. I'm gonna do this. Another one in January. And of course, if you need help, you can, you know where to find your girl. And, you know, tell Twitter that I was amazing, or Facebook that I was amazing. Yeah. If you have any more questions, please let me know. No? Okay. Thank you guys for coming. Again, you know where to find me. If you have any questions about how to calculate your income again, just let me know. And thank you all. Just give me, you know, hype me up on the internet. Make you look good. Have a good night, guys. Bye.